I began this story by introducing Charles Manson, describing his childhood, his years in reform school, and his young adulthood in the penal system, including the mentorships he received and his self-education in various philosophies and spiritual belief systems. I then wrote of his release from prison in March of 1967, his move to San Francisco, and how he began to create a family based upon his interpretation of those beliefs and lessons, starting with Mary Bruner. I wrote that they spent several months in late 1967 on the road, picking up new followers, eventually settling in the Los Angeles area, where Manson became singularly focused on becoming a famous singer-songwriter. I wrote of how Charlie met three influential men: Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, talent agent Greg Jacobson, and producer Terry Melcher, and how he used these men to try to get a recording contract to no avail. I also wrote of the influence of the Beatles' White Album, which inspired an apocalyptic vision of an impending race war, and how Charlie propagandized that vision with his family, teaching them that they were divinely chosen to lead humanity, and that anything, even murder, was acceptable in their quest to survive. I wrote of the escalation of crime and violence during the spring and summer of 1969, how Tex Watson burned 2 drug dealers, how the family invaded well-to-do homes in the dark of night, how Manson was twice forced to harm someone when his male followers failed to resolve their conflicts and put the family in danger. I also wrote of Charlie's growing rage at society, at the system, and at the very people he professed to love and care for. But Charles Manson did not actually kill the victims of the Manson family. The killers were those very young people that followed Charlie, who believed his philosophies and visions. Debunking the myths of Helter Skelter means also demonstrating the choices the actual killers made. You've read of Susan's and Tex's defiance, of Pat and Leslie's ambivalence about leaving Manson, of Bobby's wiliness at being pigeonholed into any particular movement, among examples of their free will. Was Charlie manipulating the killers? Absolutely. But did he actually brainwash or hypnotize these people, removing them from personal responsibility? No, he did not. Bobby, Susan, Mary, Tex, Patricia, Linda, Leslie, Bruce, Steve, and all who participated in the murders believed they had free will, and to a great extent they did. Each of the killers, accomplices, and accessories bear responsibility for the loss of life that occurred by their actions. At this point, I will give voice to those killers. In fact, I will use their words to describe what happened next. We piled into the car, me in the driver's seat with Sadie next to me, Katie and Linda in back, all of us in dark shirts and jeans. I was wearing cowboy boots, but the girls were barefoot. Actually, Sadie's memoir places her in the back seat. Most descriptions of that night have Sadie and Katie in back, Tex and Linda in front, with Linda poised to move to the driver's seat if pulled over. I had quite a few sores on my feet from infection, and I couldn't wear shoes. There was a rope in the back seat of the car when I got in there. There was a set of bolt cutters. Tex had a gun. I had a knife. Linda had a knife. Katie had a knife. And to my best knowledge, I believe Tex had a knife. There were 3 knives. One of them the one that Katie would end up with a broken handle that was taped, and Randy Starr's gun. We were ready. I thought we were going to go on a creepy crawly mission. Katie and Sadie were in the back seat, just being bubbly and happy. Before we left the ranch, I remember that we all took some speed. A white capsule was handed to me. I felt special, excited, chosen. The speed was passed out just before they pulled away from the ranch. We drove in silence for some time. Finally, I told the girls we were going to the house where Terry Melcher used to live because I knew the place the layout, and that when we got there, we were going to kill everyone we found and get their money. I had Linda wrap up the knives and gun in a rag on the floor and hide them at her feet. If we were stopped by the police on the way, I told her she was to throw the whole bundle out the window. Thus, Watson confirms that the three women did not know this was a killing mission until they were on the drive to Cielo. Tex did most of the talking. In fact, to my recall, he did all of the talking. As we drove, Tex began explaining the setup of the house for us. He said that he and Charlie had been there once talking to Terry, and I think he said with Dennis. Yes, he described it to us as we were traveling. I missed a turnoff, and we ended up going all the way into Hollywood, then back west on Santa Monica Boulevard, through West Hollywood and the edges of Beverly Hills. We cut up past the landscape mansions, most of them dark now, to Sunset Boulevard, then to Benedict Canyon, then finally turned left onto Cielo Drive. I pulled up to the big gate at the end of the private drive, directly under a power pole. Midnight struck. It was now the first moments of Saturday, August 9th. We parked between the power pole and the next-door neighbor's house. I climbed onto the hood of the car and shinnied up the pole, cutting the telephone line with the bolt cutters. I had no uncertainty about which wires were which. It was as though Charlie's instructions were tape-recorded in my mind and being played back, step by step, as I needed them. After the wires had fallen, I backed the car down the driveway to the street below and parked. We gathered up our clothes and weapons and quietly slipped back up the driveway. I carried the white rope over my shoulder. We looked at the fence at 10050 Cielo Drive. It is a breathtakingly rugged and luxurious residential area, secluded and quiet. Suddenly that whole section was cut off of the world and lifted up into another existence. We were separated from the whole world. Perhaps for the first time in my life, I was deeply aware of evil. I was evil. When we arrived at the Tate residence, the lights were on. The driveway was lit up. When we reached the gate, I peered in. You couldn't see the main house from there, only a corner of the garage. A yellow bug light was burning, so I was assured I hadn't cut any power lines by mistake. And a split-rail fence along the edge of the lawn that had colored Christmas lights glowing on it, even though it was the middle of summer. He told us to get our changes of clothes, and we all walked back up the hill. We walked up to the gate, but we didn't want to touch it or go over it because we thought there may be an alarm. We walked up the side of the hill and could see that we could get over the fence easier there than getting over the gate. I was told to go over first, so I threw my changes of clothes over the fence and held the knife between my teeth and climbed over and got my pants caught on part of the fence and had to kind of boost myself up. I was caught off of the fence and fell into bushes. I was followed by the other 3 people. There was a steep, brushy embankment coming down to the right side of the fence, so we tossed the extra clothes over the gate and climbed up the slope, dropping to the other side. On my first try, the speed I'd sniffed before we left threw my balance off, and I ended up tumbling down to the pavement. I dropped down into a bed of ivy and fell to my hands and knees. Together we began moving up the hill toward the house, keeping low and quiet. The house was about 100 feet away. Then a light started coming toward us. We were going to move forward in this direction toward the residence, and we saw lights coming from, apparently, this car. We had barely gotten over the gate when there was the sound of a car, and headlights loomed at the top of the driveway, heading toward us. I told the girls to get into the bushes, lie down, and be quiet. "Get down," Tex whispered sharply. "Stay here." I flattened myself on the grass, and the sour taste of panic rose in my throat. I didn't actually see the car. I just saw the headlights. Tex told us girls to lie down and be still and not make a sound. Tex leaped forward with a gun in his hand. The driver of the car had to stop and roll down his window to push the button for the automatic gate, and as he did so, I stepped forward out of the shadows, gun in right hand, knife in left, commanding him to stop. A terrified teenage boy looked up at me, his glasses flashing. As I lunged forward, the boy cried out, Please don't hurt me. I'm your friend. I won't tell." I shot him 4 times, and at some point struck out with the knife, slashing at the left arm he raised to shield his face. Then came 4 gunshots in quick succession. After he had slumped back across the seat, I reached in the window, cutting the motor and lights. He came back and told us to come with him. When we reached the car, a white Rambler, I saw a young man slumped in the seat. He told me to take the wallet from the kid that he shot. I got in the car. There was this person slumped over. I didn't see any blood or anything, but I knew he wasn't there. The 4 of us pushed it back up the driveway to the garage area to the right and rear of the main house. Hissing for the girls to follow me, I started up the driveway and rounded the turn to the house. We walked toward the residence past the garage. A neatly clipped lawn stretched from the porch to the edge of the terraced hillside that overlooked the shimmering lights of the whole west side of the LA basin. There was no sign that anyone inside had been roused by the shots. I told Linda to go around to the back of the house and check for open doors or windows. I went towards the house. There was a swimming pool. I felt like an empty shell, like my body was there, but I wasn't. There was no open windows or doors. She was back in a few moments saying that everything was locked. Tex was standing at a window, cutting the screen. He told me to go back and wait at the car. We went to the house and waited at a window next to the front door while Tex disappeared around back. Trying to get into the house, he eventually went in through a window, returned to the front door, and allowed the rest of us to enter. A window that opened into the entry hall just to the side of the front door was raised several inches, so after telling Linda to go back down to the gate and keep watch in case anyone was alerted by the sound of the shots, I slid the bottom of the screen, removed it, pushed up the window, and climbed through. It was very still inside the house. Tex opened up the window, crawled inside, and the next thing I knew he was at the front door. Pat and I went inside. Quiet in our bare feet, we went into the living room. Katie came down at one point. She asked for my knife and I gave it to her, and she told me to stay there and listen for sounds, and I did, and she left. I crept to the front door and let in Sadie. Katie had disappeared for the moment, gone down to Linda at the gate to get her knife, so the 2 of us slowly moved past a couple of large blue trunks that were standing in the hallway and slipped into the living room beyond.